tell me first here in New York City, where are you deploying most of your forces?
We have what we call critical response vehicles that come into mostly Manhattan every day. They go to sensitive locations, locations that we may have some intelligence about, or just common sense locations, iconic
Times
targets,
Square, you talked about,
that sort of thing. Times Square,
subways,
Empire State Building, and the subways. We increase our uniform presence in times such as this in the subway system. We have the second largest subway system in the world. It carries about 5 million people a day. So clearly it's a lifeline and something that we want to protect as much as we can.
Commissioner, are you sending anybody, any officials up to Boston to see if there could be any link between Boston and New York?
Well, we have officers in Boston this morning working with the
So they're on the
Boston
ground
police.
there?
Yes.
Okay. To your knowledge, I mean, you know, and of course all of this is speculation, we don't know yet, but the fact that nobody has come out, you know, overseas, you know, to take responsibility for this act, does that tell you that this may be more perhaps an act of terrorism here domestically?
I wouldn't draw a conclusion from that just because there's no claim of responsibility. We've seen other events where there hasn't been any claims of responsibility. Then we've seen them where, you know, some strange unknown entity will claim credit. So I wouldn't put too much stock in whether or not the credit is.
What's your gut right now telling you?
I'm sorry?
What's your gut right now telling you?
Well, in my office, I'm actually in a law enforcement position, so it's very difficult for me to speculate publicly on it, and I don't think it's appropriate. I want to wait and see what the Boston investigators say publicly. Obviously, we have some information. We're privy to the investigation, but it's important to have them make a determination as to what they should tell the public, and we'll see what happens at 9:30 this morning.
Right, we will indeed. Now, we were talking with Congressman Mike McCall, who's the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, and he did say it is unusual that there was no prior intelligence at all, no indications that this might happen. Generally, there might be some, I guess, noise, perhaps, that something is brewing. Does that surprise you or disturb you that this came as a complete, total surprise?
Well, it's not that unusual, quite frankly. We've had events here, we've had plots here where there wasn't any so-called chatter, and we've certainly seen that overseas as well. So that's not always the precursor to a terrorist event. That's the world in which we live. You know, there's lots of unknowns, things that we simply can't predict, and I wouldn't put too much stock in that also, that the fact that there was no chatter. We've seen, you know, lone wolves, we've seen people, one or two individuals get together where there wouldn't normally be chatter.
Although, I mean, we would hope that with all the counterterrorism efforts that we've put in place, that we would be able to hear some sort of chatter before a big devastating event like this.
We hope, but there's no guarantees.
Yeah.
And, you know, yes, we've invested a lot as a country, certainly invested a lot as a city. But that doesn't mean that some, you know, deranged individual is not going to act on his or her own or with a small group. And there is no chatter, there is no advance warning. So we're doing everything we reasonably can do to detect these things before they happen, but certainly no guarantee.
Commissioner, I mentioned early on that you led the investigation into the World Trade Center bombing back in 1993. What usually happens in the first 24 hours of an investigation like this?
Well, the first 24 hours in most investigations are critical, and you'll usually or hopefully, if something is going to break, oftentimes it happens in that first 24 hours. You get
because the evidence is fresh?
That sort of thing.
Okay.
Evidence is fresh. People's recollection is fresh. You're able to gather witnesses without them dispersing. Here you have thousands of people from out of town who are not from the immediate Boston area, who may have seen something of value, but they understandably will be leaving town. So, yes, the first 24 hours is a critical time frame in most criminal investigations.
You know, we know that there are always high targets here in the United States. You mentioned, of course, you know, you've got big places where places where people gather, like Times Square, the Empire State Building, and others. Was the Boston Marathon ever on a list of high-profile targets?
Well, I'm sure it was on a list of high concern targets, you might say, for the Boston Police Department. It's a major event in Boston. It's a holiday. People come literally from all over the country to participate. So clearly they were, I'm sure, concerned about it. But there's only so much you can do when you have thousands of people coming together. You know,
it's almost like any event that has thousands of people coming together. You're soon going to have to say that's a high-risk area then.
Right. We put in place what we call a counterterrorism overlay when we have these major events. New Year's Eve is kind of the classic example, where you have so many people in one fairly small space. But surely that the Boston Marathon was a major concern for the Boston authorities.
Is this going to change at all some of the profiles or some of the ways the events in New York that are coming up? You know, everything from a sporting event like the U.S. Open to, as you say, New Year's Eve. Is this going to change the way those are now monitored? Well,
we always re-examine those events. Every year we take a look at it. We try to change our game plan, so to speak, so it doesn't look exactly like it did the year before. But it may very well. We're going to examine events certainly in the near term that are coming up here in New York, some sporting events. We do more than just put more uniform forces there. There are other things that we can do. And I think it's fair to say that we'll be re-examining some of our tactics and strategies.
Well, you immediately put out police officers on the streets. I mean, you immediately put out an extra number of police officers after this incident came out.
Right.
And you had officers walking around in the streets with rifles in their hands. Is that something that are we going to see this heightened level from the police for quite some time here in New York?
Well, we have to make that judgment. It costs money to do that. So obviously we have to factor that in. We'll be seeing if there's any intelligence information that can give us a particular area to focus on. But, you know, we won't do this indefinitely. We have to make some judgments as to our deployments. But certainly for the near term, you'll see additional uniform presence in New York City.
Commissioner, and you know, I don't want to armchair this incident too much, you know, this bombing too much, but you know, you, as I mentioned, have built up this incredibly big counterterrorism unit here in the city. You've put cameras, I mean, literally thousands of cameras around Lower Manhattan. Something like what just happened in Boston, could that happen here, given how much surveillance you have put in Manhattan?
Look, there are no guarantees.
You basically see every street corner, don't you?
We hope that it wouldn't happen, but there are no guarantees. You know, you can do a lot of damage with a fairly rudimentary device. So we're doing everything we reasonably can do.
But how much do you rely on, let's say, the thousands of cameras that you have on the street corners? Because, like I said, you pretty much can see every part of what's going on in Manhattan in real time, right?
Well, we hope to, yes. But again, that doesn't mean that something can happen. You may capture an event happening, but it doesn't mean you could prevent it necessarily. So, as I say, again, we've done probably more than any other city that I'm aware of to protect the city, but there are no guarantees.
Yes.